بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Last time we had spoken about right. Oh no, we had talked about ghusl, and basically when a woman finishes her cycle, on how she should perfume her undergarments after she's done, as that's part of the purification. These next series of hadith, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى وحدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي شيبة وأبو كريب قال حدثنا وكيع عن هشام ابن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة قالت جاءت فاطمة بنت أبي حبيش إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالت, so Fatima bint Hubaysh, she came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم and she said, يا رسول الله, O Messenger of Allah, إني امرأة أستحاض فلا أطهر. So she says that I'm a woman that continuously bleeds, and I never, like, my bleeding never stops and I never become clean. أفعدأ الصلاة, should I leave off my prayers? فقال لا إنما ذلك عرق وليس بالحيضة. And he responded saying that that is actually it's a vein, it is not from your menstrual cycle. فإذا أقبلت الحيضة فدعي الصلاة. So whenever you have your cycle, like your menstrual cycle, at that time you would leave your prayer. وإذا أدبرتِ فاغسلي عنك الدم وصلي. And he said that whenever that cycle finishes, then you would take a bath, or you would take a shower, you would do ghusl, and then and you remove whatever traces of blood that there are, and you would pray. قال وحدثنا يحيى بن يحيى قال أخبرنا عبد العزيز بن محمد وأبو معاوية حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا جرير حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا ابن نمير حدثنا أبي حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا خلف بن هشام قال حدثنا حماد بن زيد كلهم من هشام بن عروة بمثل حديث وكيع وإسناده. So over here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different chains that corroborate the previous one. وفي حديث قتيبة بن جرير جاءت فاطمة بنت أبي حبيش ابن عبد المطلب ابن أسد. So one of the other narrations just mentions Fatima's entire lineage going back to Abdul Muttalib ibn Asad, which is the tribe. وهي امرأة منا, and he said that, and she was a woman from our tribe. قال وفي حديث حماد ابن زيد زيادة حرف تركنا ذكره. And he says that one narration, it mentions a little bit more, but it's something that I didn't feel was necessary to mention. قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا الليث حاول تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا محمد بن رمح قال أخبرنا الليث عن ابن شهاب عن عروة عن عائشة أنها قالت استفتت حبيبة بنت جحش رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالت. So Habiba, she came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم seeking fatwa, and she said إني الصحاض, that I continuously bleed. فقال إنما ذلك عرق فاغتسلي. So he صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said that that is nothing but a vein. So make sure that you make ghusl. You can go ahead and make ghusl ثم صلي, and then go and pray. فكانت تغتسل عند كل صلاة. So from then, for every prayer she would make ghusl. قال الليث بن سعد لم يذكر ابن شهاب أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم أمر حبيبة بنت جحش أن تغتسل عند كل صلاة. He says that one of the narrators, they say that, okay, well, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم never actually ordered her to make ghusl for every single prayer. That's something that she understood on her own. ولكنه شيء فعلته هي, and that's something that she did by herself. وقال ابن رمح في روايته ابنة جحش. So he's just saying that the daughter of Jahsh came to him صلى الله عليه وسلم. ولم يذكر حبيبة, without mentioning her name, حبيبة. قال وحدثنا محمد بن سلمة المرادي قال حدثنا عبد الله بن باب عن عمر بن الحارث عن ابن شهاب عن عروة بن الزبير وعمرة بنت عبد الرحمن عن عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So over here Aisha رضي الله عنها, she narrates from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم أن حبيبة بنت جحش ختنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said Habiba bint Jahsh, same woman who was mentioned previously, she was one of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, or one of the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم's wife's close relatives, her wife's cousins. وتحت عبد الرحمن بن عوف, and she was Abd al-Rahman ibn Auf's wife. استحيضت 7 سنين, and that she would continuously bleed. She continuously bled for 7 years. فاستفت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في ذلك. So she asked the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم concerning that. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن هذه ليست بالحيضة. He said that this is not your cycle, ولكن هذا إرق, but this is a vein. فاغتسلي وصلي, so make ghusl and start praying. قالت عائشة, so Aisha رضي الله عنها, she said فكانت تغتسل في مركن في حجرة أختها زينب بنت جحش. So that she went and she made ghusl in her sister's quarters. and she used basically like a bucket, and she said حتى تعلو حمرة الدم الماء. She said that to the point that, you know, as she was washing herself, so she would take water, she would wash herself, she would clean herself, that the water started turning red because of the blood. قال ابن شهاب فحدثت بذلك أبو بكر بن عبد الرحمن بن الحارث بن هشام فقال يرحم الله هند. And he said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on Hind. لو سمعت بهذه الفتية, had she heard this fatwa, والله إن كانت لتبكي, that she would be crying, لأنها كانت لا تصلي, because she had the same problem and she wouldn't pray. قال وحدثني أبو عمران محمد بن جعفر بن زياد قال أخبرنا إبراهيم يعني ابن سعد عن ابن شهاب عن عمرة بنت عبد الرحمن عن عائشة قالت جاءت حبيبة بنت جحش إلى الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. So over here Aisha, she mentions that Habiba, she came to the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم وكانت استحيضت 7 سنين, and she had this problem of continuously bleeding for 7 years. بمثل حديث عمرو بن الحارث إلى قوله تعلو حمرة الدم الماء ولم يذكر ما بعده. So he said that is very similar to the previous narration, except his narration stopped where the water turned red from her blood. قال وحدثني محمد بن المثنى قال حدثنا سفيان بن عيينة عن الزهري عن عمرة عن عائشة أن ابنة جحش كانت تستحاض 7 سنين بنحو حديثهم. And the following narration just it corroborates the previous report, saying that she had this situation, she had this state for 7 years, this irregular bleeding. قال وحدثنا محمد بن روم قال أخبرنا ليث حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا ليث أن يزيد ابن أبي حبيب عن جعفر عن عراق عن عروة عن عائشة أنها قالت. So over here Aisha رضي الله عنها, she says إن حبيبة سألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الدم. So Habiba, she asked the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم concerning blood or concerning bleeding. فقالت عائشة, so Aisha said رأيت مركنا ملآن دم. فقال لها الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم امكثي قدر ما كانت تحبسك حيضتك ثم اغتسلي وصلي. So over here Aisha radiallahu anha, she noticed that the basically the bucket that she would wash herself from, it was red from blood, and she said to the Messenger of Allah, the Messenger of Allah said to her, he said, listen, whatever your cycle was, then that is the amount that you should stop praying. And after that period ends, then he said that you should make ghusl and you should start praying. قال وحدثني موسى ابن قريش التميمي قال حدثنا إسحاق بن بكر بن مضر قال حدثني أبي قال حدثني جعفر بن ربيع عن عراق عن ابن مالك عن عروة ابن زبير عن عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So over here Aisha رضي الله عنها, she says that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said أنها قالت إن حبيبة بنت جحش. So Aisha رضي الله عنها, over here she's saying that حبيبة بنت جحش التي كانت تحت عبد الرحمن بن عوف, she was Abd al-Rahman ibn Awf's wife, شكت إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الدم. So she complained to the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم that she was bleeding. فقال لها امكثي قدر ما كانت تحبسك حيضتك. So he would say صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, like, you know, stop praying for the amount of time that you normally would have your cycle. ثم اغتسلي فكانت تغتسل عند كل صلاة. And he says, and then you should make ghusl. So she understood that she should make ghusl for every prayer. طيب. So there's, what did you guys benefit from these series of ahadith? I'm sorry? The ghusl? Yeah. The ghusl stories? These set of ahadith. So basically, in essence, what's going on? You have Habiba, she's coming to the Prophet ﷺ, she's saying, hey, listen, I have this irregular bleeding, I've had this irregular bleeding for the past 7 years, and I haven't prayed. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, no, he's like, you have to pray, but whatever your cycle was before, whatever you know to be a regular cycle, then just follow that. And the rest of the days, right, then you make ghusl, and the rest of the days you should pray. So in a normal situation, we've taken in previous hadith, so a woman who has an irregular cycle, what should she do? Dang, if you guys don't know, we have a bigger problem. So if a woman has an irregular cycle, what happens is that there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars on what the maximum amount a woman can have her period. So you have a difference between 10, 13, and 15 days. So depending on whatever opinion that you take, once you hit, and let's just use 10 for an example, once I hit the 11th day, what does that mean? I have to take ghusl, even if I'm still bleeding, because that bleeding is now considered mustahada, or irregular bleeding. It's not considered menstrual bleeding. And at that point, she would start praying, meaning that because she can start praying, all of the other things, like even intimacy and all those things, are fine, even if she is bleeding. So over here, the Prophet ﷺ is saying, like, okay, hey, listen, you have to, you can't just not pray, even if you have irregular cycles. And what does an irregular cycle look like? Does that mean that a woman continuously bleeds throughout it? No. It's basically, there are points where she's spotting, there's points where she's bleeding, but there's no way, she doesn't have a very clear stop point.
But if it's under that, like, let's say, like, stops, basically, like, 95%, or, like,
Yeah.
at, like, day 7, and
Sure.
8, 9, and 10, you'd get a little bit, but you still wouldn't.
So there's another hadith where Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions this thing called qishra bayda, and basically this is like the white secretion that comes after a woman urinates, and that will help you gauge on where you are in your cycle. So if it's clean, then that means you're clean. If it's not, that means that your cycle continued. Because the other problem with the menstrual cycle is that it can hard stop. Right, it's like you're just done, or sometimes there can be blood after it. Sometimes there can be remnants of blood that had nothing, like your period ended, right? But there's still blood that comes after it. So there's a number of different scenarios there, and I think that most women have a general idea on when their cycles are and how long they are. So if you're like, okay, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it's done. Even if you see blood afterward, what do? You just clean it, right? You just clean it and you make wudu. Because you're like, no, this is something that either it's remnant blood or it's not. But I know for sure it's not part of my cycle, and that's fine, right? Because you have an idea of what your cycle is. Nobody's going to come and dictate to you and be like, no, it actually is like this, or it's actually like that. The question then becomes is like, okay, well, sometimes like cycles shorten, meaning that between each cycle, like they can shorten or lengthen, meaning I can start earlier or I can start later. What do I do in those situations? I think the starting point is pretty clear for most women, because just like there's a minimum amount a woman can have her period, there's also a minimum amount that she has to be clean, meaning that she can't have her period and then 3 days later her period starts again. Does that make sense? Right? There has to be a gap between them. In that gap, I think it's 15 days. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and check. I don't remember clearly. But there has to be a gap between each cycle. There has to be a gap between each period. But basically, that's how you deal with it. And a woman who continues having that irregular spotting through the cycle, what does she do when it comes time for prayer? She makes wudu, right? Basically, she does the best that she can to clean. She makes wudu. And how long is that wudu good for? I'm sorry?
Until the prayer is over?
Yes, until the prayer ends. Because she's not just going to go like, well, let's say that she wants to pray dhuhr and she wants to pray her sunnah. Does she pray dhuhr and then go make wudu again and then pray again? No, right? So that prayer, that wudu is good for that prayer slot, right? So for that prayer time. Otherwise, it's too much, right? Like, every time she goes to stand to pray that she has to go make wudu again, it's going to be too demanding. So what she does is that wudu that she has, regardless of how much she bleeds, right? Because that bleeding is something that's out of her control, and because it's not impure blood, because it's not menstrual blood, it can't stop her from praying either. So that's why it's important to understand that wudu is actually for that entire window.
What about the blood that you experience after you give birth?
Yeah, so it takes the same ruling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it takes the same. The only difference is the maximum amount that can be is 40 days.
So you would go 40 days without the law?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, that can be the max. Like a lot of women, they'll finish earlier, right? So it really depends.
You're not allowed to pray. Like, it wouldn't count as in the slot prayers for that? Like, that's strictly like...
Yeah. That is strictly forbidden. Like, so whether a woman is on her menstrual cycle or whether it's postnatal bleeding, both of those have the same ruling. Like a woman can't pray during those times.
And then what about like blood? Like one time I was coming here like for Juma and like I like hurt myself, but then I already made wudu.
Yeah.
And this is like the bathroom are like not working.
Sure.
And I just kept bleeding continuously, and I was like, I need to pray, but like I keep.
Sure. So it depends on the amount of blood, right? So if it's just like a small amount of blood, then it doesn't have any effect on your wudu, and your salah would still be valid. Now, if it's like if somebody like stabbed you, right? Like there's like blood like gushing. At that point, no, right? You can't pray in that situation.
Like a paper cut?
Yeah, like a paper cut or like
Apply for like other situations too, or only like when it's like a dire.
Yeah, it's fine. Like, you know, all of these like small cuts, pricks, mosquito bites, right? All of these things, they don't break your wudu, and they don't have an effect on the prayer either.
Wait, can we go over like what does break your wudu then? Because I feel like I'm thinking like the tiniest bit of blood like I'm done.
No. Like, so it's actually something we covered previously, but it doesn't break your wudu. So what are like insect bites don't break your wudu, even though there's blood, right? You know, so how many times have you killed a mosquito and there's like a splash of blood, right?
Yeah.
No, that doesn't break it. The only thing that breaks your wudu are there are three things that break your wudu. What are those mainly?
Menstrual bleeding.
That obligates ghusl.
Oh, farting. Sorry.
Passing gas. Mm-hmm. Sleeping.
Yeah.
Good. Right. So and anything that comes out of the two private areas, right? These are the things that break your wudu. So whether I urinate, whether I defecate, some scholars even mention like even if there's pus that comes out of those areas, like that's something that wouldn't break your wudu, and you'd have to renew your wudu. Passing gas and sleeping, and these are the ones that are agreed upon. Now there are differences of opinion on other things, but these are the four main that's important to keep in mind. And now for ghusl, what obligates ghusl?
Menstruation.
Menstruation, good. Coming out of postnatal bleeding, right? A very similar ruling. Sexual intimacy, that breaks it. Ejaculation, right? That's something that causes, that obligates wudu. So all of these things are the things that obligate wudu. Does that help? And that's just it's a very quick summary. Like I said, there are things like, you know, does camel's meat break it? All right, does vomiting break it? Right? Do nosebleeds break your wudu? Like these are all differences of opinion around those. But all the other things that I mentioned, those are the ones that are agreed upon.
And for like the sleep, is there like a degree of sleep that counts? Like I'm thinking
Yeah.
short power nap.
So if it's like the dozing off, that won't break your wudu. But if it's like sleeping, yes. Even if it's like a power nap is still like 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
For passing gas, like if you just did your wudu and sometimes, you know,
So there.
right after.
So did you actually pass gas, right? That's the first question. Because sometimes we feel things in our stomach, and it's not necessary that that's passing gas. And in the situation where I'm unsure, like, or let me put it better, the Prophet ﷺ, he said very specifically, like when you're praying and you feel bowel movements, right? Like you feel something moving, he said in that situation, you have to hear or smell something. Otherwise, what do I treat it as? Otherwise, I ignore it. Yeah. But yeah.
Conditions like gas, so they tend to pass gas. So
if a person, for example, some people have issues with, they don't have urinary control, right? So what do these people do? It's the same thing as that would be very similar to a woman who is a mustahala. Right? So because she doesn't have any control over her bleeding, she would continue praying. She would make that one wudu for the prayer slot, and she would pray in that time. If a person has flatulent issues like medical, right? So we're not talking about just someone who, you know, ate something they shouldn't have eaten and like, you know, they're passing a lot of gas. No, that person has to go and they have to make wudu. But in the situation, it's okay. You can pass in front of me. But in the situation where a person is yeah, if you have a medical diagnosis, then it's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Like if you have a medical diagnosis, it's completely fine, because all you have to do is you make wudu for that time slot and you go and pray. You know, there's some people, like I said, they don't have control over their bowel movements sometimes. Sometimes people don't have control over their urine, right? Like there are a lot of different medical issues. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. But in those situations, no. You treat it the same as you would the woman who has istihala, and they would just make that one wudu, and that would last them for the prayer window. Or one of the things that you had mentioned is like, okay, well, what if it's like a lot of blood, or what if it's a lot of urine, or what if it's like, you know what I mean? Like if it starts becoming a lot, in that situation, you would renew it again.
Wait, and then for urination, like if you're like holding it, is that like also breathing? Someone told me before that like you can't hold a breather. You should like
yeah.
And then
Yes. So in general, yes. You know, but what does that mean? So because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, you know, don't hold it when it's time to pray. What does that mean? If I'm holding it to a point where it's completely distracting my prayer. Like you ever seen those kids like who start jumping around, right? Like you don't want to get to that point. But if it's like, okay, hey, yeah, I have to go, but it's not something that's going to completely distract from my prayer, then it's okay to pray like that. Okay? Anything else? No? Clear? Alhamdulillah. One of the issues that he mentions here that I think is important, like, okay, so if a woman is making wudu for everyone, does she also need to clean her private areas every time she goes and she makes, she has to renew her wudu? So he mentions that it depends on the amount of blood. So if the amount is small or minuscule, then she doesn't have to. But if it's a lot, then she has to go ahead and wash her private areas again. So he mentions the same thing that we had spoken about, like how much she can pray. And he says that she can only pray for the one farila, meaning that if it's time for dhuhr, she can only make dhuhr on that. Like, what if a woman is traveling? Does she have to make wudu again? So according to this, because she's commanded to make wudu for every salah, that means for every farila, meaning that after she prays dhuhr, she would have to what? She would make wudu again. So how can we respond to that? Yeah. Because it's fun to travel?
It's like fine. We're doing the same thing.
Sure, why would it be the same thing? Because when we travel, what happens to the prayer windows? They change, right? The prayer windows open up. So that's why it's okay for her to pray on both. Does that make sense? Meaning that for dhuhr as a resident, if I'm praying dhuhr, that window is fixed. And the window for asr is fixed. Yes? And when I'm traveling, what happens to that window? It actually becomes one, right? So instead of going the dhuhr time from going from dhuhr to asr, when does it go to? It goes to maghrib. Right? In the asr time, it overlaps too, right? So it actually moves earlier. Dhuhr time extends into asr, into maghrib, I'm sorry, and asr time extends into dhuhr. So that now becomes one large window. Does that make sense? No? When can I pray? When I'm traveling. So let's say I'm traveling, the dhuhr time starts, what am I allowed to pray right now? I can pray dhuhr and asr. Why? At the same time, yeah. Unless you're Hanafi. Huh? Then Allah needs to guide them. Yeah. They do jama', taqsir, and taqdeem, right? Because you can do taqdeem or you can do ta'khir. Yeah. No, it's for ta'khir. Yeah. So basically, what can happen is like, all right, once dhuhr time starts, I have a choice. Either I can pray dhuhr and asr at that time, or I can wait until asr time and I can combine them then. And that's fine. Both of these, neither of these is an issue.
But at the same time, you're also praying half that prayer, right?
Correct. So you're praying 2 and 2. And yeah.
What about like this is like with traveling? Is it if you're like in a place for extended period of time, like my boss has like 3 months, I adapt their resident.
Sure. So then the question then becomes is like, okay, when do I become a resident?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
So there's a difference of opinion, right? Some scholars, they say 3 days, meaning 15 prayers. Some of them say 4 days. Some of them say 10 days, right? So there's a difference of opinion amongst the madhahib. The longest one is that, okay, as long as you consider yourself a traveler, you are traveling, regardless of how long it goes. But like I said, there's a bunch of different opinions around it. I would choose the one you're most comfortable with and then go from there. I don't think it's a big deal. Like, so whether you extend it or you shorten it, I can imagine why scholars would make it shorter or longer, because when it comes to farilah and it comes to obligations, you don't want to fall short. So out of caution, what they would do is they would actually make those days shorter.
But is it haram to like do before prayer?
No, it's fine. It's a ruqsa, it's a concession, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me this concession, or He's made it easier for me. I have a choice on whether I want to utilize it or not. But he also said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He loves it when we take advantage of the concessions that He gives us. So something to think about. And this understanding that Habiba took in taking a ghusl for every salah, that's something that nobody has said it's obligated, right? That was something that she understood herself.
Can you make wudu for every prayer even if you have wudu?
Yes, this is called tajdeed. It's called renewing your wudu. And there's nothing wrong with it.
Even if I'm sad, can you do?
Of course. So we do different ibadat. Like, or I feel hot, right? I can go make wudu. There's nothing wrong with it. You can do as many wudus as you want. The only time that I would caution anyone from making multiple wudus is like if they have like a waswasa issue. Like they're not sure if their wudu sound. So what they do is like they keep making wudu, and it's just never it's never enough. So that's the only thing I would worry about. There's a narration of Aisha that Imam Nawawi mentions here. It's narrated in Bukhari. He says that Aisha radiallahu anha, she said to the other women, لا تعجلنا حتى ترينا قصة البيضاء or قصة البيضاء. So over here, Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions what I was talking about, right? So after a woman relieves herself, there's a white what is the word? There's like a white secretion that comes out afterward, and she says that use that to gauge on when your cycle has finished. And she says don't do it before that.
Wait, this is so goofy, but I don't know what that is.
Huh? It's okay. So obviously I'm not a woman, so I can't really speak too much on it. All I know is that at least from the women I know who've told me about it, is that there's this qasat bayda. It's like from the descriptions I've heard, it's like a kind of feathery that comes out. You'll huh? I'm sorry?
I don't think it's after you eat.
Okay. I don't know. That's what I know. Right. Like I said, I'm not a woman, so I don't have any experience with this. I can only share what I've read and what I've heard. Now, when does it appear? Wallahu alam, I don't know. Like maybe after a woman's cycle ends, or maybe after she relieves herself. I'm not sure. Like you guys would have a better idea of this, and I'm not going to investigate. Right? As long as you guys understand, right? That's all that matters to me. We had talked about, I think we mentioned this before, like when does a woman have to take ghusl? Immediately?
Before the next prayer.
Before the next prayer, right? That's the end time. He mentions here why. Remember, I had said that one of the narrations he had said he had some more that he had narrated in Imam Muslim. He doesn't mention it. So he mentions the reason for that is because he said Hamad is the only one, or this narrator is the only one that narrated it, and it's unique versus the other. It had unique elements of it versus the other parts of the story. So Imam Muslim didn't want to include it. Something else to hear. The Prophet ﷺ, Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that this Habiba, when she came in, that she was min khatinatin Rasulullah ﷺ, that she was from his wife's relatives. So how he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he dealt with women who were not his wives, I think this is something that's really important. When we talk about how men and women interact today, the conversation becomes very convoluted. You have some who say, no, there has to be a strict separation between men and women. There are some who are more liberal with that, and they're like, it doesn't matter, it's not a big deal. And some say that they're okay, no, there are guidelines, and some have stricter guidelines and some have looser guidelines. What can we take from this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ?
That the women felt comfortable enough to ask him if he wanted to know.
Yep. Absolutely. That women had no issue in asking him and approaching him and dealing with him. And what did he say? What could he have done?
They told them
He could have delegated that. He could have said like, okay, hey, listen, I mean, he had multiple wives, right? He could have delegated to his wives, or he could be like, okay, hey, listen, women are going to come. You guys deal with the women and then bring me the questions. And then what I'll do, I'll answer the questions and then you take that information back to them. Or, or have like some type of relay system. Why wouldn't he do that? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
there's a lot to it. It's still that feeling.
Right,
Shyness.
not just shyness. Like he wanted the women to know they had what? They had access to him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And if they had something to ask from him, that they had a voice. Like don't be shy. Like I'm here to serve, and I'm here to answer and deal with your questions. Like I'm not going to remove myself from this position. Yeah, la haya fi din, right? There's no shyness when it comes to asking questions about the religion. The other thing is like, is there potential that there's miscommunication between the two women when they bring the information? Right, that's definitely possible. So you want to remove those avenues of miscommunication so that they're able to engage in a meaningful way. And if he had any follow-up questions, right? So sometimes like, hey, what's the ruling on this? Okay, well, what does she have da-da-da? And what is she going to do then? She's going to go back, what I mean? Like it just becomes too much back and forth. I think that's something that's really important. And even if we look at the Prophet ﷺ's relationship, like with women in general, it wasn't this strange, awkward, like sense of shyness. I think there's a level of respect that should happen between men and women when they deal with each other. Should they deal with each other in a friendly way? No. I think there should be there has to be a level of professionality that's there when they're dealing with each other. Why? Right, to avoid fitna. It's very easy to assume that, like, one of the things that happens, especially in conversation, it's very easy to assume like, oh, is she flirting with me? Is he trying to hit on me? You know what I mean? And that's something that can happen when you talk about that. Why? Because there's always going to be sexual tension when it comes to men dealing with women and women dealing with men. It's always going to be there, regardless of what we feel. Regardless of like, oh, she's like my sister or he's like my brother. Okay, well, ask him what he actually feels. Or if he was given an opportunity, right? And these are very real questions. And the reason that we're saying this, because it's very important, especially for young women, to be aware of when they're interacting and when they're dealing with the opposite gender. We had mentioned this before too. When it comes to that sexual dynamic, who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given the power to? He's given the power to the women. And it's very important for women to be aware of that power that they carry so that there's no misunderstanding or misreading by men. How easy is it for a man to misread? Like, it's very easy. Why? Because we're made silly right now. No, there's a real reason. What is it?
It's your test.
I'm sorry? Right, it's part of our test, right? The greatest test that the Prophet ﷺ said that he left behind for us were women, etc., etc. Okay, cool. What else? When does a person misread? Possible.
When they want a certain outcome,
Right, and what is pushing that outcome for a man? His testosterone, right? So right, his hormone. Like, I'm being very honest, right? It's those hormones, and what happens is that anytime there are emotions or hormones or these things, what happens to your judgment? It becomes clouded, right? So, are there some men who think very highly of themselves and they think like everyone's hitting on? Yes, right? But that's more arrogance and vanity and narcissism versus many men, like they might misunderstand niceness, right? Many men might misunderstand kindness. Many men might misunderstand like the way you speak to them or the words that you use with them. So these things are very important to keep in mind. And not just that, it's like in general, if I'm dealing with the opposite gender, okay, well, as long as that conversation is public, as long as that conversation is purposeful, right? Like I'm not just making small talk or like, it's like, oh, how was your day? Right? You know what I mean? Like all of those things, what does that lead to? Right? It leads to unnecessary emotional attachment. As long as it's precise, right? Like I'm not I'm not using too many words. I'm not speaking too much. I'm not saying too much. If we as a community generally follow these guidelines, what can happen is like you have very normal interactions between them. But the one thing you're not going to have is you're not going to have close relationships, right? And that's where the problem is, and that's where the issue is. Should men and women have no relationship? No, I don't believe that. I think there have to be very natural, respectful relationships between genders. But should those close relationships be there? No, I don't, because it leads to a lot of broken hearts. It leads to a lot of mixed signals. It leads to a lot of misunderstanding. And that's not something we want. Like, subhanAllah, it's how fragile is the human heart. Right? It's like a really fragile vessel, and how often can it deal with heartbreak? Right? It's tough, right? It's tough. Like, not to say that we can't get over it, or like we don't have the ability to overcome, or like we don't deal with pain. The Prophet ﷺ, how much heartbreak did he deal with in his life? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, like from his family, like from people who like he grew up with, the loss of his son, the loss of his uncle, the loss of his wife, what I mean? Like some of his friends, they died in front of him. Some of his friends were killed in front of him. Like, what I mean? Like people who like supported him his whole life, like they're just completely cutting him off. The people who like he was raised with and he spent his whole life with, like they're ready to go to war with him. Like heartbreak's, it's a part of life, right? Heartbreak is a part of life. We shouldn't make efforts to like to increase that and to seek it, right? That doesn't build resilience. It actually builds jadedness, right? Like, people become very jaded. They become very, like when a person is just hurt, like you guys ever heard the saying, like hurt people, right? That's real. Like well, yes and no, right? Because there are some relationships that are very necessary. Especially if it comes to like certain work environments or like or mentorship relationships. It's like, okay, hey, listen, I need advice, and I need to talk to a neurologist, like a specialist, in kidneys, or a nephrologist, and it's a man. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Okay, I need to build a relationship with him. And when we talk about building relationships, does that mean best friend? No, it just means like, okay, hey, I need this person to know me so that I can explain myself, so I can get the best advice. And there are some fields like where you just can't avoid it. Okay? So for example, if you go into the medical field or if you go into education, it's dominated by who? By females. Like there's so many women. Like you go to any elementary school, you go to any middle school, you go to any high school, like it's mostly women in those spaces and places. Okay, and as a man, if you're an administrator or if you're another teacher, well, who do I have to deal with? Right, I'm gonna have to deal with females. Or even if I'm in the medical industry, right? Like, so if whether it be support staff or it be otherwise, most of the people I'm gonna deal with that space are gonna be women. And the opposite holds true. Like if I go into engineering spaces, if I go into carpentry, if I go into any of those particular spaces that are dominated by men, okay, well, what am I gonna have to do? I'm going to have to deal with the opposite gender. Again, the idea is to normalize professional relationships between genders, not to normalize close ones, right? Those can lead to very, very unhealthy places and spaces, right? And like I said, more times than not, it often leads to heartbreak or misunderstandings or different issues. And people read things differently. I had a case. There's a couple I was facilitating their divorce because they just couldn't reconcile. It turns out that this young woman was telling people that I was helping them facilitate the divorce because I wanted to marry her. I was like, no. But I'm saying like, okay, because I had someone come, they told me this. I was like, well, if that was the case, then I'm the one that helped them get married. Like, wouldn't I have stopped that if that was something that I saw and that's something that I wanted? But like I said, all it takes is what? One misread. That's it. That's all it takes is one misread, whether it be kindness, whether it be niceness, whether all it is, like all it takes is for one person to misread that. And the moment they misread it, that is something that becomes permanent. But Allah protect us. Like I said, I think navigating that relationship it's so dangerous. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about zina, it's one of the sins that He Azza wa Jal, He says, La taqrabu. Like don't go near it. He doesn't say la taznu. He doesn't say don't make zina. Right? He says don't go near zina. And if you look at a lot of the other things, it's like no, don't do this, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't do these things. But with zina, He says don't go near it. Why? Why treat it in that way? It's very slippery, right? And it's a lot of times you'll even ask couples, they're like, yo, how did you even get here? And for them, it's just like a whirlwind in their minds. They're like, I don't know. I don't know how I got here. But Allah protect us. Allah protect us. I think, like I said, you know, having those boundaries is something that's important for both genders to have. Sometimes it can be difficult, it can be complicated, especially if they're people we have to deal with constantly, right? So I think continuous interaction and continuous dealings lead to deeper relationships, and that's what can make it so hard. But I think it's important for us to keep that professional relationship. And what if the other person misreads? Is it your fault? No, right? Again, as long as you're being public, purposeful, precise, being very clear in the things that you want and the things that you need. If that person misreads, that's their fault, right? That's not your fault. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Inshallah, we'll start the next class in a few minutes. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin. Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.